Hello and welcome to this short lecture video on the Monteverdi opera Il ritorno di Ulysses in patria, or in English, The Return of Ulysses to His Homeland. This lecture will be a big picture look at this work, going into depth on its historical, musical, and biographical context before diving into a detailed discussion of the libretto, source material, plot, and all their considerations before finally moving on to a brief analysis of 2 out of the 8 arias in the work. The majority of the information contained in this lecture is a distillation of the work of Ellen Rosand, a Monteverdi scholar who literally wrote the book on this opera. Her book, Monteverdi's Last Operas, a Venetian Trilogy, is cited in several other sources about this work, and it's what I will be using as my foundation. My goal is not to add to the body of knowledge on this opera or to make an argument, but instead to distill this long-form work into a digestible explanation of the present opera. In Monteverdi's life as a composer, several jobs and positions made him relocate from Cremona to Mantua, and then finally to Venice, where he was the maestro di cappella for St. Mark's Basilica. Monteverdi wrote his opera Orfeo in 1607, which is widely considered to be the first opera and was well received by the public. After Orfeo, however, he moved away from opera composition for a number of years until being convinced by the librettist Giacomo Bauduardo through a newly written libretto, which Monteverdi transformed into the 1640 opera Il ritorno di Ulysses in patria. Ulysses' Return is an adaptation of the last 12 books of Homer's Odyssey that follows Ulysses as he returns to Ithaca after the Trojan War to reunite with his wife Penelope. The text available to Bauduardo was likely a 1573 Italian translation of the Odyssey written by Lodovico Dolce. This translation is more of an adaptation that condenses the second half of Ulysses' journey, the plot of our opera, into 8 books instead of Homer's 12, and filters the story through the lens of his own literary experience. Opera was also, by this point, still being legitimized as a genre of performance. The general cultural interest in the classical drama of Homer, along with the opera's subtitle, Tragedia, signals to us that Monteverdi and Bauduardo set out to create a serious work, working to legitimize the genre by typifying characters and a plot known to audiences at the time. There is some speculation surrounding the chronology of the performances of this work, but it's said to have been premiered at the Saints Giovanni and Paolo Basilica, owned by the Grimani family, in 1640. It was then taken to Bologna for a performance later in the same year, and then revived in Venice again the next year in 1641, receiving only these performances during Monteverdi's life. There's a lot of discussion and context to be given to the libretto of the opera existing in 12 different forms across several decades and several copyists, only formally studied in the 20th century by Wolfgang Osthoff and other early music scholars. All of the librettos are set in a 5-act structure. This was typical to the model of a Greek tragedy, and each act marks a different step in the journey of Ulysses reuniting with his wife, Penelope. Each act brings Ulysses geographically closer to her until the end of the final act, where they reunite. This 5-act libretto and structure was not translated into the score. In fact, the score exists only in 3 acts that cut some dialogue and some scenes. It's not fully clear why this discrepancy takes place, but it's said that either the 5-act structure seemed out of place in a culture that preferred 2 intermedios to 4, or the condensed version was produced for the convenience of a given performance. The 3-act structure, in my opinion, takes away the punctuation after each step Ulysses takes to get back to his lover, and, in my opinion, undermines the overall pacing and impact of the story. Pictured is Table 7 out of Rosand's books that compares the 5 and 3-act structures. When we look at this, it becomes clear that there's not a complete overhaul of the plot in this revision, but instead a restructuring. For the purposes of this analysis, however, we will use the libretto's 5-act structure in discussing the opera. Each of the moments at the end of the 5 acts punctuate different moments in the plot as follows. Act 1. Ulysses returns to the shores of Ithaca with a promise to find his wife Penelope. Act 2. Ulysses reunites with his son Telemaco. In Act 3, he plots to kill the suitors that are trying to court his wife. In Act 4, he finally does kill them, and in Act 5, Ulysses and Penelope reunite and sing a love duet together. Each of these 5 moments, again set at the end of each of the acts, are set to specific and effective music that illustrate the moment taking place. In direct contrast to Ulysses' arc of emotion, Penelope's character remains static, and her parts in music are conceived in a markedly recitative style to illustrate her chaste devotions to Ulysses despite advances from the suitors. We will choose two of these moments from Ulysses' arc to look at in detail. First, Ulysses' aria at the end of Act 1, O Fortunato, and the love duet at the end of Act 5, Sospirato. Before this analysis, though, I think it's important to clarify that the majority of the opera is sung in a recitative style, and there are few moments of intense lyricism and only 8 strophic passages in the whole work. Let's take a look at the first of these arias. In Act 1, Scene 8, we get a glimpse of the melody set to the words O Fortunato, a lively phrase in triple meter. Ulysses sings about his fortune after landing on the shores of Ithaca, meeting Minerva, a goddess disguised as a human who offers help to find his wife. In Act 1, Scene 9, we get the expanded version of this phrase where Monteverdi takes the irregularly metered text given to him and creates Monteverdi takes the irregularly metered text given to him and creates a strophic refrain aria with 2 strophes. We'll only listen to part of the one today. The choice to fit the the irregularly metered text into a lyrical setting is a deliberate choice made by Monteverdi to heighten the dramatic importance of Ulysses' arrival in Ithaca. Later in the opera, in Act 5, Scene 10, before the love duet and before Penelope even figures out that the man before her is Ulysses, there's a long exchange where she's persistent in her denial. It takes Euryclea, a servant and mother figure to the family, to confirm his identity by identifying a scar she saw on the man that matches that of Ulysses. After Penelope realizes that she's standing in front of Ulysses, she sings a lively ariatic section in Rejoice before singing her love duet with Ulysses to close out the opera. This ending love duet is admittedly slow and reflective in nature and contains several elisions between the two voices and repetition of phrases to heighten the dramatic feelings of the work. And then on to the next section of that same love duet. There's a lot to consider when looking at this opera as far as historical record keeping, chronological placement, and inconsistencies across some of the sources for this analysis, but the overall message is clear. The return of Ulysses to his homeland can be considered an apex in the work and life of Monteverdi, taking place in the years right before his death. The allusion to classical styles, the structure derived from it, and all of the elements present throughout the work cement the return of Ulysses as a landmark work in early opera and an enduring work that is still receiving performances today.